the law that they're using and the definition that they're using for anti-Semitism is very open-ended. And so he was sending me screen grabs of what they are considering to be anti-Semitic. And I'm like, oh no, I've said that. And I've said that. Am I going to end up in a gulag? And it wasn't like bad things, but there are like questioning certain things.
We'll get into that. I have the whole list that we can go over. But for context, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, it just passed Congress, like you said, with a margin of 324-91 against.
This is Senate and Congress?
No, this is just Congress. It's on its way to the Senate now.
Oh, God.
When do you ever see Congress agree on anything like this? They cannot come together on a single issue other than sending money to Ukraine and supporting Israel. That's just about the only thing that our politicians can agree on nowadays.
War, yes.
Yep.
Basically, what this does, it's in response to the rise of anti-Semitic protests on college campuses. It defines anti-Semitism to expand the definition under civil rights law. Basically, for education programs, on-campus stuff, if they're going to enforce equal civil rights for students, it has to meet this definition of anti-Semitism. And it vastly expands it to cover a lot of what's happening right now. Notably, I have the bill right here on the table that anyone can consult. It's only about 6 pages long. Nowhere in that packet does it actually establish a definition for anti-Semitism. The bill to define anti-Semitism does not have a definition for the term. Rather, they have outsourced it to an outside special interest group that is called the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. And it was started, I believe, in the mid to late 60s by Sweden with input from Israel and a couple other countries. We'll get to why that's important in a minute. But
this is what my buddy sent me.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to read these off in a second if you can't see it from here. But right now their definition of anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Basically, anti-Semitism means Jew hatred. That's not controversial. But they also include these examples. And I'm going to read through this whole list, so this will take a minute, but I just want to say ahead of time.
I'm going to tell you which one I thought I accused myself of doing.
A lot of these are legitimately egregious, hateful things. But that's not the issue. Nobody's saying hatred is good. The reason that it's a problem is that this is now potentially illegal. And that's where the problem comes in.
With punishments that aren't specified yet, correct?
Yes. So what I want to call attention to, here are the things, because the bill mentions the examples as well. This is everything that this organization, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, all the examples they list, those are now considered legally anti-Semitism under civil rights law. So, calling for, aiding, or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or an extremist view of religion.
I haven't done
Obviously terrible.
No.
Making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews as such, or the power of Jews as collective, such as, especially but not exclusively, the myth about a world Jewish conspiracy or Jews controlling the media, economy, government,
I think I'm kind of guilty on that.
I've done that on this podcast.
I'll make no comment on that, but I feel like there's pie charts that prove that that one might be a problem for a lot of us. Accusing Jews of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoings committed by a single Jewish person or group, or even for acts committed by non-Jews. Denying the fact, scope, mechanisms, or intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of the Nationalist Socialist Germany and its supporters and accomplices during World War II, aka the Holocaust.
Who was the Iranian president who was Ahmed Mojanahad or whatever his name was, who basically denied the entire Holocaust? That's what they're putting that sort of.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that one just means Holocaust denial.
Got it.
Accusing the Jews as a people or Israel as a state of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust. Accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interests of their own nations. Denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination by claiming the existence of a state of Israel as a racist endeavor. Applying double standards by requiring of it a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation. Using the symbol or images associated with classic anti-Semitism, e.g. claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel, to characterize Israel or Israelis. drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis, and lastly, holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the State of Israel.
Can I ask a question on the second to last one where they mentioned responsible for the killing of Christ? Is that not written in the Bible?
In the Bible, yeah.
So would that
And it's
then make
historically reported as well.
That is the main problem for a lot of people who object to it, because under that provision, quoting the gospel would be a violation of civil rights law now. And the reason I keep mentioning civil rights law is that they didn't define a penal code for this. It's not like, oh, if you do one of these, that's an immediate 7-year prison sentence or whatever. It's rolled in with civil rights legislation.
Yeah.
And we have seen how civil rights legislation is abused constantly in these cases. There is no equal application of civil rights law where, okay, for example, anything to do with discrimination against a racial minority, it's basically up to the person claiming to be a victim and the prosecutors in that area if they want to go after the person who did it. It doesn't matter what it is. They can expand these things because it's so vague and so ill-defined that they can make any action fit the crime they're trying to come up with. So,
can I say that there is a history of the government doing this? The FEC, I'm sorry, the
FCC?
FCC, yes, the Federal Communication System. They're the ones that regulate what can be said on the radio, can be said on television.
Yep.
They had in the late 90s, they made a shift from they were finding people based on vulgarity, right? You can't say the F word, you can't say S. Mm-hmm. They changed it from vulgarity to indecency. And the focus there became, hey, anything you do is indecent, your company is subject to fines. But they never clearly defined what indecent material was. Yeah. This was part of the problem that Howard Stern had in the early 90s, late 2000s. Part of the reason why he left terrestrial radio to go to an ungoverned, Sirius satellite radio where there was no FCC governorship over it. The problem was they never identified what was indecent, and then they made the move to scare people into complying instead of actually finding the broadcast companies, instead of finding iHeartRadio, Cumulus, all of these radio companies. They actually started finding the individual broadcasters. So if you did something that was indecent, but there wasn't a definition of what actual indecency was, they just told you it was indecent. Instead of your company getting $1 million fine, you were now on the hook for a government fine to the tune of $1.5 million for doing something you didn't know was indecent because they can't define what indecency is.
And this is exactly the problem. Because they have outsourced it to this outside group, basically all the law says is whatever this group defines anti-Semitism as, that's what we're enforcing. Yeah. Whatever examples they list on this chart, that's what we're prosecuting people for. Well, by that logic, they can just add whatever they want to the list and say, oh, that's anti-Semitism. All right, great. Guess we can't do that anymore. So, like I said, the bill does not explicitly say, oh, if you quote the Bible, you're anti-Semitic. But there are a lot of Jewish activist groups that say if you quote the Bible, you're anti-Semitic. So how long until that's codified into law?
Christ is king, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Christ is king. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that, like I said, it passed the House with 320 votes for, 91 against. That's 187 Republicans and 133 Democrats for, 21 Republicans and 70 Democrats against. So you can see Republicans overwhelmingly support this. Only 21 people refused to vote in favor of it. Why is that?
Because they didn't actually go read what was on there.
It's a 6-page bill. I mean, you idiots need to go read this. Yes.
That doesn't have the thing you mentioned.
But aren't Republicans supposed to be the free speech people?
Nope.
Isn't that the party that's always stood up and said, like, First Amendment rights, any suppression of what we have to say? Well, here's why. Here's why they didn't say no to it. Trump signs order against anti-Semitism at colleges, worrying free speech advocates. That's from 2019. This whole bill basically got its first form as a Trump executive order.
Aren't there protests happening on college campuses, though, that are anti-Semitic?
Right.
Yes.
How's that not violate this?
If that was cited 2019, how is this happening today?
Well, that's what this is in response to, because there have always been these kinds of protests. And the entirety of our government on both parties have always favored Israel in these things.
Because we're a predominantly Christian nation.
Yeah, we won't pass a bill to define anti-blackness, anti-whiteness, anti-Asian bigotry. As much as they might try to, those always fail. This is the one that makes it, because it's the group that they really want us to focus on right now. Whether it's Trump, Biden, whoever else, this is likely to pass. The Senate already has pushed for it. Senators were involved in drafting it. Biden is, of course, going to sign it. He finally condemned the college protests like 2 days ago. So this is what we have now. A vague, essentially hate speech bill where they can prosecute you for going after a favored group like this.
Yeah, this is what they're struggling with in the EU right now as well, too. So, Ireland in particular is trying to fight back on this, and they have. But the anti-hate speech laws, they're basically putting people into a pigeonhole, and it totally gets rid of the ability for you to speak any kind of truth. And this is what our Constitution is for. Like, the EU doesn't have that kind of backup, but we've seen this time and time and time and time again. Like, one of the most, it's the reason why it's the First Amendment, and it's not the 5th or the 10th or the 11th. It's our First Amendment, because this is how we stay free, is we're able to speak, we're able to know what's going on, because other people can speak. If it's bad speech, if people are saying garbage, more speech helps it, and people debate and give out, the reasons why they disagree or why this is stupid, why you shouldn't pay attention. But without that, we completely lose a free society. So, yes, they're trying to protect a group that right now is going through a lot. And so I understand the sentiment is trying to, help in a difficult time, and it's not bringing down the temperature is basically what I want to say to this too, is that it's ratcheting it up. Now, people that do normally support Israel are having a hard time supporting this bill and are saying, hey, you're literally making our holy book, the Bible, a form of anti-Semitism. How can we support that? So this is just more of pitting the left against the right, or the yays versus the it's time and time and time again we're getting pitted against each other, and we're missing the bigger picture.
And so people recognize this too, because the leader of the Democrat opposition to it was Jerry Nadler, who, as you might remember, is himself Jewish.
Yep.
But his argument against it was this bill not only would target anti-Semitism, but would also create penalties for criticism of the Israeli government. That's what I want to swing back around to, because this the IHRA was created by Sweden with input from Israel a long time ago, which basically means the Israeli government has a hand in sculpting legislation that controls what American people can say about the Israeli government. Why are we, as free American citizens, not allowed to criticize a foreign power?
Exactly.
We're allowed to criticize our own government, and there should be no restrictions against that. So how much more should we be able to say, hey, that government kind of sucks for any country anywhere else in the world? But now suddenly they are writing legislation for us that controls what we can and can't say about them.
Yeah, it's like you have to ask yourself, why is America so willing to bend over backwards for Israel? I mean, I get that it's like our station in the Middle East. It's where we could set up shop and try to implement stability in the Middle East. There's nowhere else where you can really do that. But if you're willing to bend over backwards for somebody, you have to ask, like, what kind of influence they have? Like, why is our Congress people so ready to do this for them? And what are they necessarily afraid of? Because I don't know, this goes against our core values. Yeah. So,
well, it continues to show that the people that we've elected into positions of power based on who was on the podcast who said it was Tulsi Gabbard. The people in Washington are not representing their constituents, and she continued to go back to, we are the lobby. We are the people that they should be trying to win over. Right. And instead, they're catering to their lobbyists or foreign governments. You look at our border and how it is clearly not secure, how it's becoming a problem. You sent us, and we showed it on the podcast the other day, the actual cell phone pings of people that have crossed the border illegally, and now them showing up at these different college campus protests. And then there's the admission of paid agitators by Eric Adams, acknowledging a Democrat in office in New York City, going, there are paid agitators making these situations worse. And we're not securing our own border, but yet we're spending billions sending it to Israel. We're sending tens of billions to Ukraine. but yet we're not spending the billions that it would cost here at home to secure our own border, to protect our own country. So why are we continuing to put the best interests of Israel, the best interests of Ukraine over the best interests of America?
We don't
Because
need new criminal penalties to punish the college campus protesters, by the way. Like, we don't need new things for them to violate.
It's right there.
They're already committing vandalism, public disturbances, trespassing, burglary, breaking and entering. Like, any sort of enforcement of these actual crimes that already exist that they're currently committing would be fine. But it's performative. We have to say, no, you're saying the mean words too, and that's why we're going after you so hard.
I know I'm the girl, and of course I don't like hate speech, and I don't think people should be allowed to say those things. I do believe in free speech, but like, especially if you have a platform, you should have a certain responsibility. But then that's the viewer's choice to support that platform and continue to watch it and or not. That's why we hold them to a certain standard, or why producers hold their talent to a certain standard to watch what they say based on what they want to represent. But I mean, the only thing these congressmen are thinking about right now is being canceled. If they don't support this bill, if they don't vote for this bill, then who's their lobbyists? Like, who do they get the support from? Are they going to piss Trump off? Are they going to piss Biden off? Like, it looks good to say, hey, yeah, okay, you can't say X, Y, and Z about Jews.
But the cancellation comes in the vote in the form of voting, and the fact that people are not voting out the representatives who are voting in favor of aid to go to Ukraine, in favor of aid going to Israel instead of aid going to our border. Listen, it's great for the idea of the American dream, that this country is a beacon of light, and that's a great idea if everything's going well in this country. But the problem is things are not going well in this country right now. There are there's border issues, there's drug issues, there's financial issues, there's crime issues. All of these need to be addressed before we solve the issues of other countries. Yeah, in the 60s when we're like, we're going to be the beacon of light for other countries and set a standard for the world, we were in a position to do that. We're no longer in that position.
Yeah, we need 500 good people to run for Congress. That's not a lot to ask for. 500 patriots to actually run the country the way that the vast majority of people want them to run it. And the fact that we're like passing sweeping legislation about Israel instead of things like the American flag being desecrated at campuses and having Palestine flags raised up in its place, that's crazy. Why isn't anybody in Congress outraged about that?
Because they all fly the Ukrainian flag in celebration and solidarity.
So like, why isn't America outraged about that?
It is America last from the top down.
It's just like Rob said, we're this first world country that's supposed to lead the rest of the world, and we're trying to keep up that appearance, and we can't do it anymore.
So what are the next steps for this bill? It's passed in Congress, Connor. What's the next step? It goes to the Senate.
It will now move on to the Senate.
How soon?
Within the next week or two, I believe. Okay. It's probably their next agenda item to address. If it passes there, which it likely will, because like I said, the senators had a hand in crafting it. I think Tim Scott was involved in it, or at least he's taking credit for being involved in it now. It will move on to President Biden, and then he will likely authorize it. And from then on, that will be the definition of anti-Semitism under civil rights law.
And for more of this bill, they can go to vt.com and read all about it, correct?
Absolutely.